Jailbreak update. I'm calling this more of an update video than a news video because I will be covering some of the latest updates that we've got, but also some older stuff that I wasn't able to get to in my previous video because I've been away for a few days, and then before that I was working on the Linux video. So there's been a few things that I have missed, so I want to go ahead and cover that all here in this video as well. So let's go ahead and get straight into it. So first of all, GoldHEN saying here, the hell was I thinking yesterday? I deleted the previous post because there was an error on poops without dupe. And this is unfortunate because it seemed like there was possibly a workaround to get the poops kernel exploit to work with other userland exploits, which would of course allow us to use things like the YouTube jailbreak to be able to jailbreak up to firmware 12.0 without using Star Wars Racer Revenge, which would be a huge benefit for anybody trying to jailbreak on those higher firmwares. However, there was an error in that particular method, and unfortunately it looks like it's not going to work. So using other userland exploits to jailbreak with the poops kernel exploit up to 12.0 seems to be, dead in the water for now. However, there is technically a silver lining to this, because if we can get the new kernel exploit for the PS5, which is P2JB, patience to jailbreak, because it takes potentially a couple of hours, maybe even longer, to be able to jailbreak the console using this particular method, which obviously is impractical to actually use that as a primary method of jailbreaking. But if it can be turned into a usable exploit that can at least run once on your console on a firmware like 10.20 to 12.0, then you could use this to jailbreak the console once, and then run the BD unpatch payload to unpatch the Blu-ray jailbreak, and then use that to jailbreak with the poops kernel exploit to jailbreak normally up to firmware 12.0 without having to use Star Wars Racer Revenge. And with a Blu-ray exploit chained with the poops kernel exploit instead of P2JB, you'd be able to jailbreak in just a few seconds instead of several hours. I guess that's a small silver lining if this 12.70 patience to jailbreak does get turned into a workable exploit, because there's always a chance that that might not happen, given the fact that every time you have to run the kernel exploit, you have to wait a really long time. So trying to develop an exploit where you're constantly having to test it and run it multiple times for checking stability and all of those things as you're developing the exploit could make it take a hell of a lot longer to actually turn this into a workable exploit than other kernel exploits we've seen in the past. But again, time will tell, of course. We also saw an update to the BD Jailbreak project, which added support for firmware 13.20, as well as the poops kernel exploit implemented in here. We've already seen ISOs that have the poops kernel exploit integrated. That's not really new, but what is new, of course, is the 13.20 support. But of course, this is only for people who already have an existing jailbreak, so you would have to have an existing jailbreak on 13.20 to be able to run this to unpatch the Blu-ray exploit on that firmware, and then use that to jailbreak. So this is not a new jailbreak. There seemed to be some confusion with that when this was originally updated. But another update to this as well is some improvements to the poops kernel exploit. It's now on version 1.3, which has also been included in the Lua core jailbreak as well. So poops.lua updated to fix the twin fail cursed PS5s. There are certain PS5s that seem to always fail when loading the jailbreak or having this particular issue, and it looks like GoldHEN has finally figured out the issue and solved it. So those specific PS5s that were having trouble loading this exploit should now work normally. So that's now been added in the Lua core exploit and as well as the Blu-ray exploit. So I'm sure whatever version you're using will get updated to the new version of the poops kernel exploit. If you were having issues loading the jailbreak before, maybe try with this updated version. You may have better luck now. And if you're looking for a BD jailbreak ISO to use, at the moment I'd recommend the autoloader version from itsplk, which you can download from this repo, which I'll leave in the description, and burn that to a Blu-ray disc. So you can see with this version, when it loads, it has a nice UI just like the YouTube jailbreak autoloader, where you get the progress bar showing the progress of the jailbreak as it loads, and then it will auto close the disk player once the jailbreak is loaded, and then load the payload manager from PLK as well, which will allow you to auto-load your payloads and swap out your payloads and do all of that stuff. Very similar to the YouTube jailbreak autoloader. We also have a couple of updates for the PS4. So PS4 BDJ privilege escalation using nested jar. Basically, this is effectively a userland exploit that works now on 13.0 to 13.02 on the PS4. So just a userland exploit, not a jailbreak. So something that we could potentially use to trigger any future jailbreaks that come out for the PS4. So anything up to 13.02, we could potentially use this exploit with a Blu-ray disc to load that jailbreak. So that would be the advantage of something like this. The previous Blu-ray exploit we had only worked up to firmware 12.52 on the PS4, and now we have a Blu-ray exploit that works all the way up to 13.02. So 13.0 and 13.02 now supported. So that's now available, and that comes to us from GoldHEN as well, who had reported it to Sony and then requested disclosure, and it's only now just been disclosed. And if you think that we've already been able to run the Blu-ray exploit on firmwares like 13.0, that's only by unpatching it using another jailbreak like the PlayStation Vue jailbreak to unpatch it. So next we also have Sistro, who has provided a new 13.50 version of GoldHEN to GoldHEN, who has ran it on their 13.50 console using the 0-day kernel exploit that was revealed on April 15th, which is a new kernel exploit that works on the latest firmwares on the PS4 and PS5. So it looks like GoldHEN is more or less all ready to go for firmware 13.50 once the new kernel exploit is released and we have a jailbreak that we can run on that firmware. We'll be able to load GoldHEN on it as it is already working on that firmware. Also, the PS5 did get the 13.20 update. So 13.20 has not patched that 0-day kernel exploit as suspected. As we can see, we got a little video here from GoldHEN also showing the debug settings running on 13.20. So using the 0-day kernel exploit on 13.20, showing it is working on that firmware too. So it's not been patched yet on the PS5 or PS4. It will likely be an update for the PS4 and the PS5 since the exploit affects both consoles. And then once we get an update that comes out around the same time for both consoles, that will be the update that will most likely patch this. And then we'll see if GoldHEN decides to just release it or if it goes through the HackerOne bug bounty program where we have to wait a few months for it to get disclosed. So that's the situation there regarding those exploits. Also, the whole game expiry DRM issue has now been put to rest, as we now have clarity on what this change actually does, where it seems like it adds a 30-day timer on any PlayStation games that you buy on the PS4 or PS5 store. And if your CMOS battery dies, you lose access to the game. Or, of course, if your console remains offline for more than 30 days, then you'll lose access to it unless you reconnect to renew the license. Well, we did get finally some clarification on this. There was a statement from PlayStation themselves saying players can continue to access and play their purchased games as usual. A one-time online check is required to confirm the game's license, after which no further check-ins are required. So it seems like this was just something they were doing to combat some kind of refund glitch that could be used to effectively, refund and get your money back while keeping the game. So before the March 2026 update here, you can see you got a permanent license whenever you purchased a game, whereas now you have a temporary 30-day license. And then after 14 days, once the game is outside of the refund window, it will transition into a permanent license, and then you can take your console offline and disconnect from the internet as long as it's activated as primary, and you'll be able to continue to use that game indefinitely offline. So a little bit less convenient than it was before the update. At least it's not as bad as requiring a constant reconnection to Sony's servers every 30 days to renew the license. So not great, but definitely not as bad as it originally seemed. So we're also seeing more panels being developed here, similar to Void Shell. Unfortunately, Void Shell version 3.0 seemed to get discontinued pretty early after the beta came out, which was really disappointing to see because it definitely looked very promising to me. So we now have Sonic Loader, and the good thing about Sonic Loader is this is open source and there's no expiry timer, so it should work indefinitely. So it has a lot of the same kind of features that Void Shell had. It has the ability to send payloads, it's got a built-in package installer, it can remotely launch your games, it has a lot of other payload functionality built in that you can customize in the settings, like toggling KStuff, as well as the ability to download and install things like KStuff and Shadow Mount. You have things like an avatar changer, remote account activation, and lots of other payload functionality like the app dumper and everything all built in here. So if you loved Void Shell and you're looking for some kind of replacement, I guess Sonic Loader is a good option at the moment, especially given the fact that it is open source, so it can continue to get supported and updated even if the main developer decides to stop supporting it. You can have other people contribute to it and make it better. So hopefully we will see this continue to get developed over time and get improved. So anyway, that's going to do it here for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed this one or found the information useful. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe, and